Hello and welcome back to my garden. Today I'm going to do a bit of seed sowing, and that's simply because the walkway project which I was going to work on today, well, we got rain overnight, so it's sort of a bit of a wet mess right now. Maybe by later this afternoon it'll dry out enough that I can get back to work on that. But I now have all the materials that I need to complete the project. That's the good news. And the bad news is you're just not going to be watching that today. Maybe Monday. You will see the vegetable garden, the new vegetable garden pathway going. In the meantime, like I said, I'm going to do some seed sowing. But before I do that, I want to show you something I've been working on in the greenhouse. As you may or may not be aware, I built these benches shortly after I built the greenhouse. And I made the decision to go with a wire mesh on top, and that was just simply so any and all excess water that's dripping from the plants or whatever would just obviously go right through, and I wouldn't have to really worry about if I did so for instance, if I did a wood top, I wouldn't have to worry about the slats or anything rotting due to moisture, etc., etc., etc. But as I'm growing as a gardener, I'm learning a few things, and one of them is that I want to do more bottom watering of my plants. And I recently purchased, I think it was like a 6-pack of these off of Amazon these are small, for like, I don't know, $18, $15, something along those lines. And I can put some plants in there and I can water from the bottom. I'm also playing around with a couple of other ideas so far as trays are concerned, and I do have my plastic 1020 trays, which I will also use. There's a minor problem though. This cloth right here sags, and when it sags, everything sort of obviously bends towards wherever it's sagging into, which becomes a bit of an annoyance because then when you water things, even in a tray, water's obviously going to go to the lowest point, and therefore any plants or seed trays that are on the higher point won't get as much water. You guys kind of see what I'm going with here. So over the last few days I was playing around with some ideas. Let me show you what I did. Now I had a bunch of scrap wood from when I tore down my old compost bins, and I think there was something else, maybe a raised bed or two. So there was still some wood that was in fairly decent condition. So what I did was I just cut them into 2-foot lengths here, and I laid them down as slats. Now this side, I did this side first because I wanted to see how this idea would work, and I'm kind of liking it. One of the biggest advantages is the tray will lay flat and level. So whatever I put in there, obviously the water won't slosh around. I'm not sure if it's in shot here, but this is the other idea I'm playing with, and this is a full-size baking tray. What I eventually hope to do is line it obviously with pots, fill it up with water, and then I will hopefully be good for the day. That's the theory. But by going to a tray system like this, and many of you may already do this, and doing a lot of bottom watering, then I don't have to worry so much about the water getting onto the slats and rotting the slats, because it'll all obviously be contained in here. Yes, obviously some water will get onto the slats, but overall, I think this is going to be a better idea for me long term. Now, the other thing I'm playing with, and you guys probably just saw me do this, is the slat is not nailed down. But what I do have is a couple of screws on either side to basically help it keep spacing, so between all the other slats. I'm not sure if I'm going to like this idea, if I'm going to keep this idea. And if I do this over on the other side, I think what I'm going to do is screw them down, maybe 1 screw in each board, and then over time as they gray and age, then maybe I'll paint the bench. I don't know, there's ideas, but I think I want to do this over on the other side where I still have the wire mesh. And I really should have thought about this months ago and done it months ago when there was basically nothing on the benches. But we're getting to that time where I'm going to be starting more and more seeds, and I'll be needing more and more space on the benches, and I'll work it out. I'll figure it out somehow. But if you do anything like bottom watering or using a table with slats on it, let me know your feedback. Let me show you what we're sowing today. Okay, I have a selection of seeds here, and if you haven't watched my previous videos on starting seeds or organizing your seeds, or many of the other videos I've done earlier this year, go back, check them out. One of the things I do is I look at the back of all the seed packets. Once I've decided what I'm going to grow for the season, so far as flowers, vegetables, etc., I then go into my calendar that comes with my computer, or even use paper calendar, and I just look up on the internet what my last alleged freeze date is going to be, and then I count back the weeks from there. And then what I do is I look at each of the seed packets, and this one tells me it's 6 to 8 weeks before last frost. So I can start the Maltese cross today, as well as a bunch of dahlia seeds and delphiums and some other seeds that I have here. And then next week I'll have another batch of seeds to sow, the week after that, so on and so forth. But anyways, let's start sowing. Now, one of the things I like to do, first take a peek inside the seed packet here to see how many seeds there are, and then how big are the seeds. So in this case, we have Maltese cross. They look about the size of poppy seeds, which is pretty good. Not too, they are small, but comparatively, there are smaller seeds out there. So these aren't too bad. And I think I've had mixed results with Maltese cross. I have had Maltese cross grow successfully in the garden, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to sow the entire packet here. And what I'm going to sow them in is my black seed tray here. Now, I did do a whole video on my various different types of trays and what I sow stuff in, and how I decide what to sow in is sometimes depending upon the seeds and the seed packets. So if I only wanted to grow half of this Maltese cross packet, I would probably go with the smaller seed tray that I have. If I wanted to grow multiples, then I would use a bigger tray, so on and so forth. If there was 10 seeds in here, then I'd probably do small pots. So all I like to do is fill up the seed tray, pretty obvious. And then always look at the back of the packets as to how deep you plant your seeds. Some seeds are surface sown, as I think I mentioned in a previous video with snapdragons and a few other flowers I had. And these are going to be surface sown as well. So I'm just going to take my seeds, sprinkle them all in. Then I made this little press out of a block of wood. Just press them into the soil label. And as I mentioned in a previous video, what I'm doing this year, and I don't know if this is going to show up or not. So I'm putting the name, obviously, the date of which I sowed it, and then how many days to germination. The reason I'm doing how many days to germination is because in the past, I've had trays sitting up on the bench here, and I'm like, nothing's happening. Why isn't anything happening? And I'd be worried that either they're not going to germinate at all, or they died at some point, or I just have to wait longer, and I could never remember. And then I have to go find the seed packet. If I remember to go find the seed packet and then look it up and then try to remember when I planted them. So this year I'm just doing the date in which I'm sowing them and then how many days to germination. And this way I can look and go, okay, it's going to sow in 21 days. It's only been 20 days. Give it another 3 to 4 days, something should pop up. And just because something says 7 to 21 days, I think I've mentioned this in previous videos, but I'll mention it again. Sometimes they can come up in 25 days. Sometimes they can come up in 5 days. It's an average approximation as to when they actually germinate. And then I always save my seed packets. I just built a wood box out of scrap wood that I had, and I stained it and I waxed it and all sorts of pretty things. But I always keep my seed packets to remind me as to what the color might be, other information that's on the back of the seed packet. And at the end of the season, when I go through that box, I can go, oh yeah, Maltese cross. I remember I sowed a whole tray of them and nothing grew, or they all died after growing, whatever the case, or I really like these and I have to buy more. So that's what I do. You could do whatever you want, but I try to stay as organized as possible. The next one I'm going to do is the Bride Gara. It's a 4-foot tall Gara. I've never seen a 4-foot tall Gara before. It has white flowers, and this one is going to be, so the instructions here say, press into soil, do not cover. So this Gara is apparently also going to need sun to germinate. So what I've decided to do for the Gara is use one of my new trays here, and I'm going to use my terracotta pots. And what I will do is, let's see, 3, 6, 9, 12. 12, I have 25 seeds, so I'll do 2 seeds in each pot because not every seed will germinate. You hope it does. And I made up my label. Now I'm only making up one label, but if all of these pots do germinate, then I'll make up additional labels. And this way, if I ever have to move a pot out of the tray or something, I won't forget what it is. Now the Gara here, this takes 21 to 35 days to germinate. So it's important that I did write that on the label, otherwise I'd be going nuts after like 30 days. Now I know it may take up to 40 days for all these to germinate. The next two I'm going to do are delphiums. I've tried growing delphiums in the past, and I mentioned earlier that due to my ignorance in gardening, I did not realize that probably 90 to 99% of all delphiums don't grow beyond zone 7. They're just not tolerant of the heat for the most part. But I have found a version here called Requiens delphium. There you go. Hopefully that focuses. And this one is supposed to grow up to zone 9. So I'm going to try growing this one. Now this one requires the seeds to be about 1/8 of an inch deep. So all I'm going to do is just take some mix and just sprinkle it on top, not too thickly. And this one's done. Now this next one is one that I intended to grow it, but it wasn't something that I saw online. Instead, it was a burpees mix that I just grabbed off of the shelf in one of the big box stores. I think I got this last year, maybe at Target, and this is the Fantasia Mixed Delphium. As you can see, or hopefully you can see, all blues. I have no idea what it's going to turn out like, so I sowed all the seeds into this one little pot. If they all come up, great. I can always prick them out, divide them into their own pots. If none of them come up, oh well. I have no idea what the germination rate is going to be on these delphiums, so they're in this pot. And the last batch of seeds I'm going to do are dahlias. And I have several varieties here, and some of these are probably getting on in years, I think. But one of them is new. One of them is Dahlia Watercolor Mix. I picked that up this year. It's a variety I've never grown before. So I'm going to give that a whirl. Now, my intentions with all these seed-sown dahlias are to spread them throughout the flower garden, front gardens, maybe some pots up on the back deck. But these other mixes, and one of them is Bishop's Children, which has a nice red stem on it, and an orangey flower. Let's see if we can show that to you guys. And the other one here is going to be just mixed. So I have no idea, it just says random colors. So it could just be very similar to the watercolor mix. So I'm going to sow these, and I'll show you what I'm sowing them in next. Okay, so the Bishop's Children, as I was opening the packet, there's not a lot in there, and they're from 2022. So I don't know how many are going to germinate. So I did 4 to 6 of them in each of these pots, and I have 4 of these pots, and we'll see what germinates. I don't have a lot of hope for all of them germinating, but if one germinates per pot, that's 4 plants, and then I can take those 4 plants and plant them somewhere else in the garden. I don't really want more than necessarily 4 of them at this point. If I change my mind, and I can always sow more after the last freeze outside and just let them grow on for the season. And then at the end of the season, I can bring them into the greenhouse to stay safe from the frosts, and then plant them out as a bigger plant next year out into the garden. Now the next packet here is the mixed dahlia seeds, and honestly, there was once upon a time 100 seeds in here, and I've planted them a few times, and I think I might even have a couple of tubers, but I think these were older than the Bishop's Children. So I just turned around and put the entire seed packet into a tray. And my guess was there's probably 30 to 40 seeds at least. I don't think half of them will germinate, but we will see. If they do, great. If they don't, it is what it is. But I've got this whole tray now filled up and ready to go. And the last one is the Dahlia Watercolor Mix. It doesn't appear like there's a lot of seeds in here, so let me grab a small tray. Okay, so there were probably more seeds than I thought in the packet, but they're all crammed in here. And like many seeds, I don't expect a 100% germination rate, but if I do get a 100% germination rate, once their true leaves come in, I'll then prick them out of this tray and plant them onto their own individual pots. Okay, so I've got a bunch of seeds sown for this week. I got my dahlias sown, Maltese Cross, Coleus, some delphiums, Gara, and even if half of that stuff germinates, honestly, I will be thrilled. And then if another half of it survives until springtime to be planted out, I'd even be more thrilled. If you guys have any questions, comments, thoughts, suggestions, leave those comments below. If you guys are sowing something different from what I'm sowing, or something unique, or something exciting, or something you'd like to share with the group, please leave those comments below. Thank you to all the people who have subscribed, and thank you to all the people who do leave comments. It all helps the channel grow, which is fantastic. And as always, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, click that bell icon to be notified when I do post up a new video. Sophie here would much appreciate it. If you don't follow me on Instagram, give a follow on Instagram. If you don't want to sign up for another social media account, you could always go over to my website, growinggreenfinger.com, where if you scroll to the bottom of any of the pages, you'll then see all my Instagram photos there. Let's see, if you haven't checked out the YouTube community page, well, now it's not a community page anymore. It's just a posts page. YouTube changed the name. But if you head over to my YouTube page and you see the posts tab up top, click on that. I try to post up behind the scenes stuff that's going on, quizzes, polls, that kind of thing, various random photos, sometimes picture of Sophie. And with all that being said, I'm going to catch you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.